The most beautiful love story of a single farmer and the humble young woman who changed his life before the sun rose. The farmer was already awake. He did not need an alarm. His body had learned the rhythm of the land long ago. Every morning he sat up on the edge of his old wooden bed, listening to the quiet. The house was small, made of brick and mud, with a tin roof that made soft sounds when the wind passed over it. There was no voice calling his name, no footsteps moving around. Only silence greeted him as it had for many years. He washed his face with cold water from a metal bowl and stepped outside. The air smelled of soil and grass. In the distance, the fields waited, dark and calm before daylight. This land was his life. He had inherited it from his father, who had inherited it from his own father. Generation after generation, the land stayed while people came and went. For the farmer, the land was more than property. It was his companion, his duty, and sometimes his only comfort. He began his work without thinking much. He fed the animals, checked the fences, and walked slowly through the fields. His hands were rough, shaped by years of hard work. He rarely complained. The villagers respected him for that. They knew him as a man who kept his word, paid his debts, and helped others when needed. But they also knew he kept his distance. He did not sit long at tea stalls. He did not laugh loudly or share stories about his personal life. Most people thought he liked being alone. The truth was more complicated. There was a time when he had imagined a different life. When he was younger, he dreamed of a home filled with laughter, a wife waiting for him at sunset, children running between the crops. But life had moved differently. Responsibilities came early. His parents fell ill one after another, and caring for them became his first priority. By the time they passed away, many years had gone by. Friends had married. Younger men now had families of their own. At first he told himself that marriage would come later. Then later turned into years. Proposals were discussed once or twice, but nothing worked out. Some families wanted more money than he had. Others thought he was too quiet, too serious. Slowly, the talk stopped. The farmer stopped expecting anything to change. During the day, work kept his mind busy, but evenings were harder. When the sky turned orange and the fields grew quiet, he would sit outside his house with a cup of tea. From far away, he could hear sounds of village life, children playing, women talking, radios playing softly. Those sounds reminded him of what he did not have. He never said it out loud, but loneliness sat beside him like an invisible guest. Sometimes he wondered if this was all his life would be. Wake up, work, eat, sleep, and repeat. There was no drama, no big failure, but also no deep joy. Just a steady, silent routine. He told himself that many people lived like this and survived. He was strong enough to do the same. Still, there were nights when sleep came late. He would lie on his bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about small things. What would it feel like to share a meal with someone every day? To ask how their day went and have someone ask him the same. These thoughts made his chest feel heavy, so he pushed them away and focused on the next day's work. In the village, people respected him, but few truly knew him. Some thought he was proud. Others thought he was broken by life. No one asked him directly, and he never explained. He helped neighbors during harvest season, lent tools when asked, and stayed quiet when praised. He believed good work spoke for itself. On market days, he went to town to sell his produce. He stood behind his cart, watching people pass by. Couples walked together, families bargained loudly, children pulled at their parents' clothes. He felt like an observer of a world he once wanted to be part of but now only watched from a distance. When the day ended, he counted his earnings carefully and returned home before dark. His house reflected his life, clean but simple. There were no decorations, no extra furniture, just what was needed. A bed, a table, a few chairs, and shelves with farming tools and old papers. One corner of the room still held his parents' belongings, untouched. He could not bring himself to remove them. They were reminders of love he once had and responsibilities he had fulfilled. Every now and then, someone in the village would suggest he should think about marriage again. He would smile politely and change the topic. Inside, he felt tired of explanations. How could he explain that after so many years of being alone, hope had become a fragile thing? He was afraid of wanting something again and losing it. Yet deep down, there was a small part of him that had not given up completely. It stayed quiet, like a seed buried under the soil, waiting for rain. He did not know it yet, but his life was standing at the edge of change. One ordinary morning, he walked to the fields as usual. The sky was clear and the air was fresh. He noticed nothing special, no sign that this day would be different from any other. But life often changes quietly, without announcement. The farmer continued his work, unaware that soon, someone would step into his routine and slowly bring light into places he had kept closed for years. For now, he was just a single farmer, rooted in silence, living a life that seemed already written. He believed his story was simple and almost complete. He did not know that the most meaningful chapter had not even begun. The young woman arrived in the village quietly, without noise or attention. There was no celebration, no welcoming crowd. She came with a small bag and tired eyes, stepping off an old bus at the edge of the dusty road. Life had already taught her many lessons, most of them difficult. She was still young, but responsibility had made her older than her years. She had come to stay with distant relatives who lived in a small house near the fields. They were not rich people, but they offered her a roof and simple food. In return, she helped them with household work and looked for small jobs in the village. She did not complain. She believed that hard work was the only way to move forward. From the first day, people noticed her nature. She spoke softly and greeted everyone with respect. She dressed simply and never tried to stand out. When elders spoke, she listened carefully. When children ran around, she smiled at them kindly. Some villagers felt sorry for her situation, while others admired her patience. She did not share much about her past, and no one forced her to explain. One morning, her relatives told her about a farmer who needed help in his fields. They said he was a good man, honest and fair, but very quiet. The work would be hard, but the pay would be enough to support her basic needs. She agreed without hesitation. Work did not scare her. Depending on others without effort did. That same day, she walked toward the fields early in the morning. The sun was still low and the air was cool. As she approached the land, she saw the farmer working alone, just as he always did. He noticed her from a distance and paused for a moment, surprised to see someone new. She greeted him politely and explained why she was there. Her voice was calm, not demanding, not nervous. The farmer listened carefully. He looked at her hands, her posture, and her eyes. He had seen many people who avoided work, but she did not look like one of them. After a short pause, he nodded and agreed to let her help. At first, their interaction was limited. He showed her what needed to be done and then returned to his own tasks. She followed his instructions carefully. She worked with focus, even when the sun grew strong and sweat covered her face. She did not complain or slow down. The farmer noticed this silently. As the hours passed, something unusual happened. The field did not feel as quiet as it usually did. There were small sounds, her footsteps, the soft movement of crops, an occasional question asked politely. The farmer was not used to company, but he did not feel disturbed. Instead, the silence felt lighter. During their first break, she sat at a distance and drank water from her bottle. The farmer offered her tea from his old flask. She thanked him with a gentle smile. That simple exchange felt different to him. He could not remember the last time he had shared tea with someone in his fields. Days turned into more days. She came regularly, always on time. Slowly, small conversations began. She asked about the crops, the weather, and the land. He answered briefly at first, but over time his words grew longer. He explained how the soil changed with seasons and how his father had taught him everything he knew. She listened with genuine interest, not just politeness. She never acted as if she knew more than him. Instead, she respected his experience. That respect touched him deeply. In return, he noticed her strength. Even when her hands became sore, she continued working. Even when she was tired, she did not lose her calm nature. Sometimes during lunch, they sat under the shade of a tree. They ate simple food, flatbread, vegetables, and water. She shared her food without hesitation, even when it was not much. He found himself waiting for these breaks more than he expected. The villagers began to notice her presence in the fields. Some were curious. Some whispered quietly, but nothing was improper. Their connection was built on work and respect. Still, for the farmer, something had shifted. The fields that once felt empty now felt alive. The young woman also felt the change. Working beside him made her feel safe. He never spoke harshly, never raised his voice. He treated her with dignity like an equal. In a world where she had often felt small, this meant a lot. She began to feel that maybe life could be gentle too. One afternoon, dark clouds gathered suddenly. Rain began to fall heavily. They rushed to protect the tools and crops. In the chaos, they worked together without words, understanding each other's movements. When the rain slowed, they stood under a shelter, breathing hard and smiling quietly. That moment stayed with both of them. As weeks passed, the farmer noticed changes in himself. He slept better. He found himself planning the next day with more interest. The evenings felt less heavy. He did not understand why, but the loneliness that once sat beside him felt weaker. The young woman also began to feel hopeful. She started believing that her future did not have to be full of struggle only. She felt seen and valued, not for beauty or background, but for who she was. Neither of them spoke of feelings. There was no rush, no promise, no label. Just two people sharing time, effort, and quiet understanding. Yet deep inside, something was growing slowly, like a plant finding its way towards sunlight. The farmer still believed his life was simple. The young woman still believed her journey was uncertain. But their paths had crossed for a reason, and both lives were already changing in small but meaningful ways. What began as simple work was turning into something neither of them had planned, but both of them would soon be unable to ignore. As time passed, working together became a normal part of their lives. What once felt new slowly turned into a steady routine. Every morning, the young woman arrived early, and every morning the farmer was already there. They did not need to call out to each other. Just seeing one another was enough to begin the day. Their conversations grew naturally. At first, they talked only about work, but soon other topics found their way in. The farmer spoke about the changing seasons and how each year brought its own challenges. He explained how drought could ruin months of effort and how too much rain could be just as harmful. The young woman listened closely, asking questions with real interest. She admired how deeply he understood the land, as if it were part of him. One day, while resting under a tree, she spoke about her childhood. She did not share everything, only simple memories. She talked about waking up early to help at home, about learning to cook with her mother, and about how she had always believed that patience could carry a person through hard times. Her voice was calm, but the farmer could sense that life had not been easy for her. He did not interrupt, he just listened. Listening had become something he was good at over the years. When she finished, there was a quiet moment between them. Then he nodded slowly, showing understanding without needing words. That simple response made her feel heard. As days turned into weeks, trust settled between them like something solid and warm. They began to rely on each other without thinking. If one was tired, the other noticed. If one forgot something, the other remembered. These small acts created a bond stronger than long conversations. The farmer surprised himself one afternoon when he laughed out loud at something she said. The sound felt strange in his own ears. He had not laughed freely in a long time. When he noticed her smiling back at him, something gentle stirred in his chest. He quickly turned his attention back to work, unsure of what to do with that feeling. The young woman noticed changes in him too. He spoke more openly now. He shared stories about his parents, about how his father taught him to read the sky for signs of weather, and how his mother used to bring him food in the fields. When he spoke of them, his voice softened. She could feel the love and respect he still carried for them. Sometimes after a long day they walked back toward the village together. The road was quiet, lined with trees and open land. Their steps matched without effort. They did not always talk, but silence no longer felt empty. It felt peaceful. The villagers noticed the change in the farmer. He looked lighter, more present. He greeted people more often and stayed a little longer during conversations. Some people smiled knowingly, while others whispered quietly. The farmer heard none of it, and even if he did, he would not have cared. For the first time in years, he felt comfortable being himself. The young woman also felt different. Her shoulders felt less heavy, and her thoughts were not always filled with worry. Working with the farmer gave her a sense of balance. She felt useful, respected, and safe. She no longer felt like she was just surviving. She felt like she was living. One evening, after finishing work late, the farmer invited her to sit outside his house for tea. It was a simple invitation, but it carried meaning. She agreed, slightly nervous but comfortable. They sat on old chairs, watching the sky change color. The tea was warm and the air was calm. They talked about small things, about village life, about food, about plans for the next week. But beneath those simple words there was an unspoken connection. Both of them felt it, though neither knew how to name it. That night after she left, the farmer sat alone for a long time. He thought about how his house had felt different with her presence nearby. Less quiet, less heavy. He wondered when this change had started and why it felt so natural. He also felt fear. He was not used to hope anymore, and hope made him nervous. The young woman, lying on her bed that night, stared at the ceiling and replayed the day in her mind. She wondered why she felt calm around him and why his quiet nature made her feel safe. She reminded herself not to expect too much. Life had taught her that expectations could lead to pain. Still, her heart did not listen. The next days continued much the same, but the bond deepened. They supported each other during difficult work. When the crops needed extra care, they stayed longer without complaint. When a tool broke, they fixed it together. These shared struggles brought them closer. One afternoon, the farmer injured his hand slightly while working. It was not serious, but the young woman noticed immediately. She insisted he rest while she finished the task. He resisted at first, but then agreed. As she worked, he watched her with a feeling he could no longer ignore. It was care, deep, quiet care. When she returned, she cleaned his hand carefully and wrapped it with cloth. Their hands touched briefly and both felt the moment strongly. Neither spoke. Words were not needed. That evening, the farmer realized something important. He was no longer just passing time. He was looking forward to tomorrow because she would be there. This realization scared him, but it also brought warmth. For the first time in many years, his life did not feel like it was slowly ending. It felt like something new was beginning. The young woman also reached a quiet understanding. She trusted him not just as a person she worked with, but as someone who cared about her well-being. That trust was precious to her. She guarded it carefully, knowing how rare it was. Still, neither of them spoke of love. They allowed the bond to grow at its own pace without pressure or promises. It was built on shared effort, respect, and kindness. Something strong was forming, something that would soon be tested. For now, they stood at a gentle turning point. Their lives were no longer separate, yet not fully joined. They were walking side by side, unaware that the calm they enjoyed would soon face challenges that would force both of them to confront their feelings and their fears. Change never comes alone. As the bond between the farmer and the young woman grew stronger, the outside world slowly began to notice. At first, it was only quiet looks and small pauses in conversation when they passed by together. Then came whispers, light at first, then heavier. The village was small and nothing stayed hidden for long. Some people spoke kindly, saying it was good to see the farmer smiling again. Others were not so gentle. They questioned the difference in their ages, their backgrounds, and their futures. They wondered what the young woman wanted and what the farmer could offer. These words did not reach them directly at first, but like wind, they found their way through small signs and changed behavior. The farmer noticed that some villagers avoided long conversations with him. A few old friends became distant. When he went to the market, he felt eyes following him. He tried to ignore it, telling himself that people would always talk. Still, the weight of their judgment slowly pressed on him. The young woman felt it too. Some women spoke to her with forced smiles. Others gave advice she had not asked for. They warned her about life, about choices, about disappointment. Though their words were calm, their meaning was clear. She carried these comments silently, not wanting to bring trouble into the farmer's life. One evening, after a long day of work, the farmer noticed she was quieter than usual. Her steps were slower, her eyes thoughtful. He asked if she was tired. She smiled and said she was fine, but he could tell she was holding something inside. That night, both of them lay awake, thinking. The farmer stared at the ceiling, feeling old fears return. He asked himself difficult questions. Was he being selfish? Was he holding her back? Could he give her the future she deserved? He had accepted his simple life long ago, but he did not want her to feel trapped in it. The young woman, on the other hand, felt torn. She cared deeply for him, even if she had not said it out loud. But she was afraid of becoming the reason he faced criticism or pain. She had spent much of her life trying not to be a burden. The thought of being one again hurt deeply. The next few days felt different. Their conversations were shorter. Their smiles were weaker. They still worked together, but the ease between them had faded slightly. Both noticed it, and both blamed themselves. One afternoon, a misunderstanding happened. The farmer heard from someone that the young woman might be planning to leave the village for a better opportunity. The words were unclear, but they struck him hard. Fear filled his chest before he could think clearly. When he saw her later that day, his tone was distant. He asked her directly if she planned to leave. She was surprised by his sudden question and hurt by the way it was asked. She explained that someone had mentioned a possible job far away, but she had not made any decision. Still, the damage was done. The trust they had built felt shaken. She felt accused. He felt afraid. Neither expressed their true feelings. Silence grew between them, heavier than before. That evening she did not stay for tea. She left early, her steps quick and determined. The farmer watched her go, his heart heavy with regret. He realized too late that fear had guided his words instead of care. The next day she did not come to the fields. At first the farmer told himself she was just busy, but as hours passed, worry replaced denial. The fields felt empty again like they had before she arrived. The sounds were gone. The warmth was gone. The loneliness returned stronger than ever. He worked without rest, trying to silence his thoughts, but every corner of the land reminded him of her. The place where they rested, the tree under which they shared meals, the path they walked together. Everything carried her presence. The young woman stayed indoors that day, helping her relatives. Her hands worked, but her mind was elsewhere. She replayed the conversation again and again. She wondered if she had misunderstood him, or if he truly wanted distance. Her heart felt heavy, but she refused to cry. She told herself she had survived worse. Days passed like this. They avoided each other, not by plan, but by fear. The village noticed the change and whispered even more. Some said it was for the best. Others felt sad seeing them apart. One evening, an elderly neighbor visited the farmer. She had known him since childhood. She spoke gently, without blame. She reminded him of the man he was: kind, patient, and honest. She told him that silence could protect pain, but it could also destroy understanding. Her words stayed with him long after she left. That night, the farmer realized something important. He had been afraid of losing her, but by staying silent, he was already losing her. He understood that life did not offer many chances like this. If he did nothing, regret would become his only companion. The next morning, he made a decision. He walked toward the house where the young woman stayed. His steps were slow but determined. His heart raced, not from fear of rejection but from the weight of what needed to be said. When she opened the door and saw him, surprise filled her eyes. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he asked if they could talk. They sat outside, away from listening ears. The farmer spoke honestly, something he had not done fully before. He admitted his fear, his confusion, and his mistake. He told her he had spoken from insecurity, not from lack of trust. His voice shook slightly, but he did not stop. The young woman listened quietly. When he finished, she spoke too. She shared her fears of being a burden, of causing trouble in his life, of being judged by others. She admitted that she had considered leaving, not because she wanted to, but because she thought it might make things easier for him. As they spoke, the distance between them slowly disappeared. Misunderstanding gave way to clarity. Pain gave way to relief. They did not promise anything grand. They did not speak of the future in clear terms. But they agreed on one thing: they would not let fear or others' opinions decide for them. They would face whatever came together with honesty. When they stood up, the world felt lighter. The village was still the same. People would still talk. Life would still be uncertain. But the bond between them felt stronger for having been tested. As they walked back toward the field side by side, the farmer knew this was only another chapter, not the end. And the young woman knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would no longer face them alone. What they did not yet know was that the final test of their journey would require even greater courage, but it would also bring the peace they both had been quietly searching for all along. The days after their honest conversation felt calmer, though nothing outside had changed. The village was the same, the fields were the same, and people still talked. But inside both of them, something had settled. They were no longer guessing each other's thoughts. They were no longer hiding behind silence. They returned to work together, slowly at first, careful not to rush anything. The farmer noticed how naturally things fell back into place. The young woman noticed it too. They spoke more openly now, not just about work, but about worries and hopes. Even when they disagreed on small things, they listened instead of turning away. The farmer felt stronger than before, not because his problems were gone, but because he was no longer facing them alone. He stopped questioning his worth every night. Instead, he focused on what he could offer: honesty, care, and a steady presence. He understood that life did not need to be perfect to be meaningful. The young woman also changed. She stopped seeing herself as someone who only took space. She realized that her kindness, effort, and support mattered. Being with him did not make her smaller. It made her braver. She began to imagine a future not filled with fear, but with simple possibilities. One afternoon, while working in the fields, the farmer spoke about improving the land. He talked about planting new crops and fixing old systems. He asked her opinion without thinking. When she shared her thoughts, he listened carefully and nodded. That moment showed both of them how far they had come. They were no longer just working side by side. They were planning together. Slowly, the villagers noticed another change. The farmer no longer looked unsure. The young woman no longer looked distant. Their bond appeared steady, not secretive or rushed. Some people still judged, but many began to accept what they saw. Time softened opinions that words never could. One evening, the farmer invited the young woman's relatives to his home for tea. It was a simple gesture, but an important one. He wanted things to be clear and respectful. The meeting was quiet and honest. He spoke about responsibility, work, and intentions without promises he could not keep. The relatives listened carefully. They saw sincerity, not pride. After that evening, the young woman felt a deep sense of peace. For the first time, she did not feel like she was standing on uncertain ground. Whatever happened next, it would be built on truth. The farmer also felt relief. He had spent much of his life avoiding difficult steps, thinking silence was safer. Now he understood that courage did not always mean loud action. Sometimes it meant standing firm in simple truth. As seasons changed, so did their life. Work continued, but it felt lighter. Meals were shared more often. Laughter returned naturally. The farmer's house no longer felt empty. Even when the young woman was not there, her presence remained in small ways. An extra cup on the table, fresh flowers near the door, warmth in the air. They did not rush into big celebrations or announcements. Their relationship grew quietly, rooted in daily life. They faced challenges together, poor weather, financial worries, moments of doubt. But each challenge strengthened their trust. One morning, as they walked through the fields, the farmer stopped and looked around. The land looked the same, yet everything felt different. He realized that love had not changed his life by taking him somewhere new. It had changed his life by making him see what he already had with new eyes. The young woman felt the same. She had not escaped hardship completely, but she had found balance. She felt valued not because someone saved her, but because someone stood beside her. Over time, their bond became known not for drama, but for stability. People saw how they supported each other, how they worked together, how they faced life without fear. Even those who once doubted them slowly accepted the truth. One evening, sitting outside as the sun set, the farmer spoke softly about the future. He did not make big promises. He spoke about shared work, shared meals, and shared effort. The young woman listened, her eyes calm. She did not need grand words. She only needed honesty. She replied simply, saying she wanted the same peace, respect, and togetherness. That was enough. Their life continued without sudden miracles, but something more valuable happened. They built a partnership that felt safe. The farmer was no longer just surviving. He was living with purpose. The young woman was no longer just enduring. She was growing. In time, the house that once held silence became a place of warmth. The fields that once felt heavy became symbols of shared effort. The village that once whispered learned to respect what it could not control. This was not a love story filled with grand gestures or perfect moments. It was a story of patience, understanding, and quiet strength. A story where two ordinary people chose courage over fear and honesty over silence. The single farmer, who once believed his life was complete in its loneliness, found meaning he never expected. The humble young woman, who once believed she was only passing through life, found a place where she truly belonged. Together, they proved that the most beautiful love stories are not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes they grow slowly like crops in a field, shaped by care, effort, and time. And when they finally bloom, they change everything, not by force but by truth.